From George FIoyd to Tyre Nichols, from traffic stop to fatal chokeholds, police brutality in America is not new. But why does it keep happening? And why does justice system always seem out of reach? Watch and pay attention, and I will share my thought later.
This is not something I've ever been called in my life, and it's a little disheartening because, like I said, where I'm from, it's just not a thing, you know.
Gotta stop you right there, Deputy Crow. Before I jump into this, I'm gonna explain to you what you just said. You've never been called that, and where you're from, it's not a thing. It's not a thing for you where you're from. You can look through this playlist for a video called Decentering, and that might help. We can come back to that if we need. The reason we're here today is you made a list of ways you like to mess with civilians while you're doing your job as a public servant.
Just gonna piss you off. It's so much fun. You know, we pass each other like such. I like to hit my brakes. Get the blood flowing. You know what I'm talking about? Really, I'm helping you out, if you think about it. Figured I'd let you in on a couple of fun things that I like to do. Are we just fucking with you?
Also, it was really gross that later on, after you took the videos down, you said, I took the videos down personally, they didn't win.
No, I didn't get fired. No, they didn't win.
So let's talk about the history of your job. You chose this job, and in America there are 700 to 800,000 people who do that job every day. Ish. Hard to keep track, you guys won't hold still when we count. Now that being said, I'm sure there are dozens of good ones. You probably think you're one of the good ones, don't you? Let's just jump back in time to what your job originated as, okay? In 1865-ish, again, America's real lax with this kind of history and dates, so. Your job used to either be patrols or catchers. That was your job. Ultimately, it morphed into what you do today as a living. Here's what some of those responsibilities were. Your job was to capture runaways, to prevent revolts, to enforce laws restricting enslaved people's movements. That is what your job was at its core when it started. It didn't even have the title that it has today until around 1838 in Boston, where the very first change happened, let's call it. It was modeled after the British system, which really just started a few years earlier in 1829. This was really the change from it being volunteer and informal to publicly funded and organized. 1845 rolls around, New York gets their first one. 1851 rolls around, Chicago gets its first PD. Probably notice there's some in-between time between 1865 and 1838, right? So it didn't become this role until 1865. This was really the start of the formality in 1838, but there was some lead time in between there where it started to kind of take shape. Things take time. Let's blow past that to 1865, where we get what's called Act Codes starting. During what's called the Reconstruction era, it was your job to enforce these black codes. You might be wondering what a black code is. Don't worry, I had time. A couple examples were curfews. It was your job to enforce curfews, specifically for black people, hence the name. Also, yearly labor contracts. African Americans were often required to sign yearly labor contracts to white landowners or their employers. If they refused or failed to fulfill the contract, they would be fined or forced into unpaid labor. It was also the job to prohibit occupations of certain types for certain people. Again, we're talking about black codes specifically. I'll let you guess what people we're talking about. It was your job to prevent land ownership, specifically limits to land ownership that people could have if they were African American. Vagrancy was another thing. It was your job to enforce vagrancy. This one here is called apprenticeship, and it might be the most sinister. African American children who became orphans were forced into labor. It was their job to go to work, and it was your job to enforce that. Fast forward to the mid-1800s, we move to what's called Jim Crow era, where you enforce more things. Your job to enforce the suppression of boating. Speaking of that, make sure you go to this website here and make sure your boating registration is still active. Also your job to suppress civil rights protests. Hear that. It was your job to stop people from trying to get rights that are civil rights. It was your job to stop that. I know, you're one of the good ones, I heard. One more of the things was racial etiquette. It was your job to enforce people to yield to whites on the sidewalk and to address white people with proper deference. I had to look up what deference means. You ready? It is to speak to someone with humble submission and respect. Now, all of that being said, if you can't see why messing with people is so far away from the necessities of your role or the need as a person who is white to correct the actions of other whites, specifically these because it's the job you chose, then I don't know what to tell you, man. You don't seem empathetic in your responses. That's why I DM'd you and told you to turn your comments on. You read it. You didn't. You don't seem sincere in your apology because, again, you said,
No, they didn't win.
and I know Massac County is aware of your actions. I don't know why people keep getting this job and not taking it with all sincerity. You have one of the only jobs where you can do what you just did online and on social media and then still retain employment with that employer. Somebody talks crazy to a customer at McDonald's, they're getting unemployed. Yet you still get to keep your job after not only that video, but making multiple previous videos talking about different interactions you've had with civilians. You need to do better. That's the honest ending to this. You just need to do better. You have extremely problematic responses, you have knee-jerk actions and sentences, which tells me that you're not fully equipped to do the role which you chose. The role that you chose.
So this guy is telling basically how cops started in America as slave patrols and slave catchers, and how, you know, it's different now and this, that, and the other. But my argument would be actually that cops never stopped slavery or slave patrols. They're on slave patrols currently right now. They're doing it every fucking day because America never actually banned slavery. We thought we did, but we didn't. If you actually read the wording, it's right here. It says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime wherever or whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. So it says, because these are commas, basically might as well be parentheses, but it says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the U.S. Except, so that just erases everything. Everything you just said. There shall not be any slavery in America, except as a punishment for crime. So for criminals, they'll make a criminal, which you think that's fine. Who gives a fuck? They're criminals. They're pieces of shit. They're like the bottom of society. They deserve to be slaves because they're criminals. So let me just make sure you keep that thought process, because what happened is after they, let all the slaves go, they freed the slaves or whatever, there was a whole bunch of black people that were just kind of standing around. They didn't really have any place to go or a place to be or a thing to do. They didn't own property. They didn't have a job. So they didn't have a place to sleep at night. So they would just kind of stand around and chill. So guess what they did? They invented a crime called loitering. So whenever you're loitering, which is literally just standing around, minding your own fucking business, standing in a place, all of a sudden that's criminal. Now that's criminal. So you can make that criminal a slave again. So all the black people that were just standing around, that didn't have jobs and didn't have a place to go, didn't have a place to sleep, they just made them all criminals again by saying that they're loiterers. That's exactly what they've done repeatedly. They did it with fucking vagrancy. They've done it with drugs. They've done it with pants sagging. I think it was in North Carolina or South Carolina. They passed a law stating that you're not allowed to show your underwear. And if you do show your underwear at all, then cops have the right to stop you and ask for your ID and do all this other shit to you and search you. Everything. Like a whole... Who the fuck is that attacking? Who is that targeting? You think it's targeting the people that sag their pants a lot? Stop and frisk laws. That was used illegally, or, well, I wouldn't even say illegally. They just fucking used it as a way to be racist. They saw a Hispanic person, they saw a black person, they would go up to them and stop and frisk them. And whether they did something or didn't do anything, doesn't matter. If they saw him for the 20th time, they would still stop that motherfucker and frisk him again. Which is unconstitutional. All of this shit's unconstitutional. I want you to understand that. The broken windows theory that they fucking have done. Broken windows policing. I'm telling you, dude, they do this shit purposefully to make sure that they can continue slavery. Because slavery was never stopped in America. We just changed who the owners were. So the owners of the slaves are now governments. The actual government, whether it's state, federal, local, doesn't matter. City, fucking county. The government owns the slaves. And then they pimp out the slaves to Walmart, AT&T, Victoria's Secret, McDonald's, Whole Foods. That's just 5. I asked for 5 examples and I got 5 examples. I'm pretty sure you could ask for 100 and they would give you 100. These corporations have benefited off of slave labor. They currently, right now in America, currently benefit of slave labor. We never abolished slavery in America. Every time a cop is putting a person in jail and that person is duly convicted of a crime, they're now a slave. Why do you think that the majority of, or the disproportionality of people that are in prison are black? Because this is still a racist system. Okay, I argue about systemic racism and interpersonal racism all the time because people get those two things very, very confused. And we've done a lot to fix systemic racism in America as well. But the one place that we haven't, because it's still codified into the fucking Constitution and hasn't actually been fixed or amended yet, is slavery. Straight up fucking slavery. Still fucking exists all day, every day. Every single time a cop arrests a person and that person gets duly convicted of a crime, they are now subject to be a slave. So just understand that. Aside from that, there's more slaves in the world today than there ever has been in the history of the world. More alive today than ever before. So if you really hate slavery and you really want to fight against slavery, you can do that right now. Actively. You just don't, because you don't even realize it's happening still. But it is. Almost all of Dubai has been built on slave labor. Look it up. It's pretty fucking easy to find out. Anyways, Unicor, that's another fucking person or another business that benefits off slave labor. Like, they're the ones that actually contract the slaves to the companies to work for them. So just understand all of this. Okay? The other thing that I would want to talk about is, I don't know if you remember who President Richard Nixon is, but one of his aides, or whoever he was at the time, I'm pretty sure it was one of his aides, straight up said that they couldn't arrest people for protesting the Vietnam War because we have freedom of speech in America, right? So instead, they made pot illegal and started the war on drugs so that they can go after and criminalize every single person who does drugs, because their thought process was, oh, the people who are protesting my war, they all seem to smoke weed. So I'm going to legalize pot, and I'm going to make sure that we go after and arrest everybody for pot now. And that's exactly what they did. The same thing with the crack. They literally made sentencing for crack 10 times worse than white powder, because black people were known to do crack while white people were known to do the powder version. It's all written into the system, man. I talk a lot about systemic and interpersonal, like racism, and this is a perfect example of systemic racism. We've done a great job in America of eliminating actual fucking systemic racism, but this is one where we haven't even fucking touched it. We haven't even tried to touch it because it's written into the fucking law, except as a punishment. So, yes, they started off as slave patrols. Yes, they started as slave catchers. I don't think it ever ended. I think today, in 2024, cops are still slave catchers and still fucking slave patrols. That's what they do. So, if you want to argue with me, awesome. Do it down in the fucking comments. I will gladly take on this argument and die on this hill. But, yeah. The position of being a cop isn't something you should be proud of, in my opinion. And again, if 2 bad cops exist and 100 of them see them be bad cops and do nothing about it, then you have 102 bad cops. They say that, there's just a few bad apples, but they never finish that sentence. The finished sentence is a few rotten apples spoils the whole bunch. So it's a great analogy that they use, but they just forget the rest of the analogy. So anyways, have a good one. I really appreciate you listening if you did.
I can't say that I'm surprised to see this stitch, because I came across his post, if you can recall my video from about 2 weeks ago, and I originally seen the uproar he had caused over on Twitter, and I knew it was just a matter of time because when I had found his video on this app, he had his stitches turned off, he had the duets turned off, he even had the comments turned off to where you couldn't even leave any kind of remark. But he had already had enough support from his following in the comment sections, and so I went and looked at all of his other videos, and there was an obvious pattern to his content. And I thought to myself, imagine having a position in society where you need to show empathy and concern for your fellow citizens, but instead you choose to harass and poke fun and goof off with your peers and cause more stress to them instead. And so here we are being taught a lesson by a citizen when it shouldn't have been necessary to begin with. But when people say ACAB or defund the police, it goes over their heads because they don't know what we're talking about. I will say that I believe this position should require more than a 6-month course and a certificate.
Police brutality is more than a bad cop having a bad day. It is the excessive, unjustified use of force, often against people who are unarmed, complained, or not resisting arrest. And in the US, it does not happen equally. Black, brown, and poor communities suffer the most. Every year, American police kill over 1,000 people. No other developed countries come close. Unarmed, asleep, mentally ill, running away, none of that guarantees safety when you are staring down the barren of American law enforcement. Police brutality in the US is not just modern, it is historical, originating in slave patrols, evolving through segregation enforcement, and mutating into today's militarized police department. The system is not broken, it was built like this, to protect property, not people, to control, not to serve. George FIoyd's death sparked global protests, but how many names have we forgotten? Body cams, witnesses, even live-stream murders, still fewer are charged, fewer are convicted, the bad protect its own. Why don't bad cops face justice? Because of legal shit like qualified immunity, corrupt unions, and broken internal review systems. Many departments investigate themselves, and surprised, they find nothing wrongdoing. But the people are fighting back, from marching in the streets to filming every stop. Communities are demanding change. Change will not come easy, but silence guarantees more victims. This fight is not just about black lives, it is about every life endangered by unchecked power. Police brutality is not just an issue, it is a crisis of justice, a crisis of humanity, and unless we confront it, reform it, and hold it accountable, no one is truly safe. Thank you for watching, guys. Don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comment box below. Until next time, cheers and have a good one.